Hey, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. I'm here with Frankie B. Washington. This is your second time on the channel. How you
Yes,
doing?
it is. Yes, it is. Oh, whew. Man, a
I was
lot of
just,
stuff's been going on.
yeah, we were talking before we went live. You are like the happiest person I've ever seen. You're always
I
smiling.
I try to. I mean, the thing about it is, what's the point of just mulling around and being all sad and all that stuff? It's like if I really were to talk about my life, it's some sad stories in it. There's a lot of sadness in it, a lot of pain, a lot of stuff. But I'm glad that I had a lot of wonderful people who I crossed paths with during my journey, who helped me to show that you can see the sunlight. The sunlight is there. Just keep moving forward and whatever. So that's why I try to keep that smile going.
Right. Well, you and
Yeah.
I both had a serious problem this year, right? I don't know if you knew about my car accident. Did you?
Well, actually, I'll tell you the reason why, which is funny, was because I did watch that. I watched the Dan Fraga interview that you did,
Okay.
and when Dan was talking about the whole thing about his hand, like he said he was having hand tremors, I was like, man, I said I had the same thing. I experienced a similar thing where it was back in 2017, where I was working out, running, getting back, and I was getting to some good shape and stuff, and I was feeling good. And then, I've been used to, I used to lift a lot and stuff like that, so I'm used to pain. And so when I would get sore, you get sore. You go, okay, well, it's just soreness. And when I put some ice on it, take a couple of ibuprofens, and you'll be all right. You'll get through it.
Yeah,
This
you just
particular,
described my coming home from work ritual.
yeah, but this particular pain started kicking in. Like it was slow. First it was in my neck, and then it was kind of like in my right arm, which was my drawing arm. And I was like, oh man, I told my wife, and I said, and this is back in 2017. I said, hon, I said, something's kind of weird. I'm feeling these weird tingling in my hands and stuff like that. So it went on for a little bit longer, and then finally I told my primary care physician, and he said, all right. He said, let's look at it. And they were like, okay, let's do some scans. And they did scans. They sent me to a specialist, and then no one could really find out what was going on. So we're going back and forth. They're talking about medicines, and I'm like, I don't want to be on a bunch of medicines and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then finally, I found the right specialist who looked at one of my X-rays, and he said, hold on a second, let's take one of your neck. And they looked at my neck, and they found that I had a bulging disc in my neck. And so he said, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll do surgery. And they did. They went right in. I don't know if you see the scar, but there's a
Oh,
little scar right there. But they went through my neck and got rid of and took care of that bulging disc, and then they put some titanium in it, a titanium plate in the base of it, and then the pain was gone.
oh, okay.
And so that was the first incident, and then from there, the next year, I thought everything was all cool, and then I started feeling a tingling in my right leg, my thigh, and then it turned into like this sciatic nerve, like fiery pain.
That sciatic nerves, when that kicks
Yeah,
in, it's all you could do not to cry. I don't care
yeah,
how
I,
you
I
think
tell
you are.
people what the other part of it was listening to you when you was talking about your car accident and how you said you felt that. I call it Iggy. Like I don't when I feel that sense of what you call depression, when you just kind of like you're kind of in slumber. I say the Iggy thoughts, the Iggy feelings. Well, I was
Okay.
in that state of Igginess where I was in such excruciating. I could not even sleep in the bed. Like
Oh
what I
God.
did was we had like my father-in-law had given us his old like sitting chair of a recliner, and I remember sitting in our old apartment, like propped up in it with like pillows and stuff, and I was sitting there watching the $6 Million Man. Like I had like the whole DVD, and I was just in that Iggy state of mind. I couldn't draw, I couldn't do anything,
And how
and the
old were you?
pain. No, this is back in 2018.
So how,
I'm,
how I
I'm,
don't know
I'm
your age.
oh,
How
I'm turning 55 this year. I'm right
okay.
behind you.
Yeah,
So I was in my 40s.
yeah, you're in your 40s and you're like,
Yeah,
this is my life now?
yeah, and the pain is like when I tell people like I've gone through various pain levels. It's a pain where you feel like you're dying. You feel like you're like something so bad. Like, am I dying? And when I went to my doctors and stuff, I thought I was. I thought I was like something seriously going on. And then again, the specialist came out. They did an MRI, and they looked into my lower spine, and they said you're L5. You got a herniated disc.
Oh,
And so I had to go against surgery. And so they went in the back and did what they had to do, and then it took care of it. And so I'm thinking everything is fine. So now let's go up to now. Last year,
yeah.
last year Me and my wife were going out there, and I'm like, man, we're gonna get back. I'm gonna get back because I've always worked out. As I've gotten older, I'm like, I want to try to maintain the machine. I want to be like, I want to be able to still do. I can't do what I used to do,
Yeah.
clearly, but I still want to be able to maintain the machine. And we're walking a good pace and whatever, and I feel like this jerky motion, like just feel it like a jerky motion in my walk, and I'm going, maybe I pulled something. Okay, didn't think about it. 2 weeks, I'm going with this. I'm just dealing with it. I'm kind of like, it's nothing. I'll just shake it off. Finally, my wife was like, she said, look, Frank, why don't you go to my chiropractor? And go, and I'm like, I don't know. And I'm one of those kind of dudes. I don't know, a chiropractor. I did some stuff before, and I was like, but then finally I said, you know what? I'll do it. Went to a chiropractor. This guy was fantastic. What he did was he said, look, he said, before I even touch you, you need to get an x-ray. And I was like, x-ray? And he said, yes, I cannot touch you unless I get an x-ray. I went to go get an x-ray on my hips. He comes back, he looks at it, and he goes, there you go. He said, the problem's right there. He says, you have osteoarthritis in both hips.
Oh God.
And I was like, whoa. And he said, yeah. He said, I could try to help stimulate you, but I'll be honest with you. You got it bad.
Yeah, this is beyond me.
Yeah, this is beyond me. So he tried to help me a little bit, but then I contacted my primary care physician. He looked at the x-rays and he said, okay, let's get you into a specialist. So that's when the orthopedics came. So this is all last year. Last year, while I was working on King Cryptid, wrapping up King Cryptid and working on Codgers and Cowboys, I'm still like, I'm going through pain. I'm hobbling around and stuff like that. And I finally got this great surgeon who was orthopedic. And he said, okay, he said, the only thing we could really do is we got to look at, he gave me, they give you all the sort of stuff you can go through, cortisone shots and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But then he said, the reality is that you got it so bad that surgery is probably the only thing we can really do. That means going in, total hip replacement, titanium steel inside your body. That's it.
You're going to be an Iron Man pretty
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, that's what I'm becoming. I'm becoming a cyborg.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I just had my first surgery in February, and it was wild. It was like, it's funny because I told my wife, it's like, I don't think about surgeries when I go through it. What I think about is I'm going to take a quick nap and I'm gonna wake up.
You're a pro now.
Yeah, but only afterwards. That's when the reality hits me how
Right.
major it is. Like if you sit down and somebody, I tell anybody out there that's about in the chat and stuff, you should watch a hip replacement. It is the craziest thing.
You. No,
It's
thank
like
you.
it's like it puts in context the human body and how we're like action figures and how like these incredible medical people can do things to you, but like a mechanic. Take your car apart and they just rip the tires off and the lug nuts. Think about that as your leg.
Did you get both hip replaced at the same time?
Oh no. I'm planning on going for my second surgery in June.
Okay, because I had a foreman. His name was Frank also.
Yep.
And he was 10 years older than me, but this was 15 years ago.
Yep.
And I used to joke when Frank walked in a room, he would hit both sides of the door buck before he would go in.
Yeah.
That's how bad he was walking.
Yeah.
And you could just see his eyes were welling up with tears.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, the doctor said I got to get my hips replaced. I'm like, then go do it.
Yeah.
He's like, well, it only lasts 10 years. I said, then it's 10 years without pain.
Oh, no. It's funny because that's the difference with me. Because I'm turning 55, I'm probably the youngest. Like, they were like, and plus I told them my history. I said, I used to lift and stuff like that. My work regimen of what, even when I was, before my surgery, I went through pre physical therapy.
Yeah.
And then I still continued.
You got to know what to expect.
After I finished that, I still was doing the exercises leading up to my surgery. So I was like, my discipline is there. I plan on working out. And the thing about it is many people who tend to get these things, they tend to not either they may not have worked out a lot, or if they did work out, they're getting it much more later in their life, where it gets harder. It just gets harder. The worst thing they told me was knee replacements are like the worst. Like those are like the hardest to like really recover. They gave me a 6 month.
I don't like thinking about any damage to the knees. That's like my eyeballs and knees.
Yeah, they gave me a 6 month range. They said we're gonna give you a 6 month range of your ability to heal, your healing ability during that time. So I said, well, I looked at my wife and I said, it looks like 2025. That's gonna be the year of healing, because I'm doing 2 surgeries.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a year of just trying to get the strength in one and the other and such like. But the surgery was perfect. I remember just I blinked out. Like I
Yeah.
remember like being there. They were like, "Hey, how you doing, friend?" I was like, "What's your name?" Frankie B. Washington. They gave the date of my birth, and next thing they said, "Okay." And I remember blinking, and then I woke up and I was in recovery.
Yep. I'll finish with my foreman.
Yeah.
So the way the jobs end, you split up. So I don't see him for about 9 years,
Yep.
and I see him on another job, and his face is thin, he's all muscular and
Yep.
everything. I'm like, Frank, what are you doing? He goes, I'm retiring. He looked older when I met him.
Yep.
Now he's got two hips. He goes, John, I'm mad at myself. I think of you a lot. He goes, I should have listened to you and got my hips
Yeah.
replaced. He waited a couple
Yeah.
of years until he literally couldn't stand it anymore. He goes, John, they had me walking within the day. He goes, I got both hips done
Yeah.
at the same time, and
They get you up. They don't play around. I was in the hospital.
divorced. He goes, John,
Yeah.
I got a 25-year-old Mexican girl.
I knew that was coming.
He was smiling. Frank looked
But
great.
but they don't mess around. Like they had me like on the next day. Like I stayed overnight, and then the next day they had the PT guy come, and he was like, "All right, get out of bed, get out of."
Yeah.
And I'm like all doped up, man. They had me on crazy
They're
stuff.
pulling you out of
They
bed.
like they said, "Get on up." They said, "You got to stand and walk." And so I started walking, and then they said, "Okay, let's go down the hallway." Walk down the hallway. They said, "Okay, let's do some stairs." And then I was like, "Oh my god."
Yeah.
They don't play. They even told us that like beforehand. They said we want you to be walking because we need to make
Right.
sure that this thing works.
You got to be moving.
You got to be moving. And then once the drugs started, it was rough because they had me on oxy, man, and I don't know how people. Whew, I didn't have a good time on oxy. I
I'll
didn't
tell you
enjoy it.
this.
I didn't enjoy that.
A year ago, February, I had 6 hernias.
Ooh,
I was at work and I lifted something up and it started to expand. It looked like
ooh,
that alien, I
yeah.
was like, okay.
Ooh,
I knew I had a hernia, but I left it.
ooh,
I went to the doctor. They were just like, "You go." So I took 6 weeks off, and it's just like you said. If anybody's never had surgery, they just
yeah.
put you in a big towel over you. You know what I
Yep.
mean? They put your ass on a stainless steel
Yep.
old bed, and you're like, "Ugh," they laugh at you, and then they're like, "Here you go. Here's a needle," and then you wake up in a recovery room.
Yeah,
Like
you're
that.
in the recovery room.
Yeah. And
Medical
I remember I
science,
woke
man.
up. They were like, "Get up, get up!" And
Yeah.
oh my god,
I'm all for. I've said it's so funny because we're doing a comic book about artificial, like a robot, sentient
right,
robots. But the reality is that I'm all for human enhancement, cybernetics, bionics, anything in which it can enhance a human being to be more better than what they are. I'm all for that. AI sentient robots. I don't know. There's that part where I'm like, I don't know if because we don't understand the mind that well.
right.
So in creating something that it could potentially look at us and go, well, why should I listen to you? I'm clearly smarter than you are. I can build a stronger body.
Right.
There's that part of me where I go, yeah, why wouldn't a machine think that? Why wouldn't it just be like eventually after learning all the stuff from humans, it'd be like, well, I'm better than you. Why wouldn't I just, build a better body and then I'll be more powerful than you? Whereas if we were just building stuff, yeah, there you go. Right? Yeah, Alex, like well, not RoboCop. RoboCop was a cyborg. So he was a human. He was a human hybrid. Where Terminators were straight on
Yeah.
sentient killing machine robots. Whereas RoboCop would probably be in the lines of like a cyborg, which would be, technically I have now titanium. Like I got to see an X-ray of my new hip as compared to my old hip, and I have like this beautiful chunk of titanium in my hip now, and then I'm gonna get a matching pair. And
Yeah.
so I'm technically a cyborg. I already got some metal in my neck as well, so
There you
I'm
go.
part machine.
More human than human. What
Yeah.
Keith who says the oxys are strong. I used to party my fit.
Oh,
When I,
dude.
when I got to the car accident, I didn't realize I was
Ooh.
in shock for a couple of hours. So
Ooh.
what they sent me home. They just put a neck brace on. I never got
Yep.
surgery or anything like that. I healed up pretty fine. But they gave me Oxycontins, and I never touched them. I gave them to my wife. I don't know if she threw them away, whatever. But like, I'm
It's
a firm
rough,
believer. Don't take any painkillers. Either do it for recreation and you know what you're doing, or don't do it at all because
I had one moment where I thought everything was cool. Now remember I told you about my sciatic nerve pain. Like that was I thought I was all done with that, right?
No,
So on the second night, because I was warned, they said, well, look, you're on heavy drugs right now. You feel kind of good, and I said, yeah, I feel good. So the second night rolled in, and I never forget it. I'm in my bed, and I actually have a CPAP machine too. So I have a CPAP machine. So I'm in the bed, laying on my back, and all of a sudden I just woke up. I woke up, and I was screaming in my mask because my sciatic nerve came back in my right leg so bad. And when I tell people what it feels like, it feels, think of like a 4th of July sparkler, but that's your leg,
Yeah.
and someone just lights it, and it just slowly is just sparkling off, and you're just, it's burning. And I was like, oh my god, and it just gave me nightmares because I was like, you're back. And then I'm freaking out, and I call myself, I'm like, what's going on here? And they were like, well, what probably happened is because, again, I'll tell anybody, if you're very curious about hip replacements and you want to see, look on YouTube. But when these guys, when they do the surgery on you, they're pulling your body apart,
Right.
and so they're not gentle.
No.
Think of a mechanic with a car or a vehicle. They're like, and grabbing stuff. Because I remember, after I came home, I was like, I'm gonna watch it, and I was like, wow, like that's what they did to me. Like literally pulled some dude's leg off and was like, there's his leg, and had to break. They had to break the bone to put the new piece, and they hammered the piece in, the
Yeah.
titanium in. It's pretty brutal, and they were like, most likely it shook up stuff inside your body. So now I've been dealing with a resurgence of my nerve pain. It's healing. It's little bit better, but now I'm using lidocaine cream on it just to kind of help the burning.
They went into, like, when I did my hernia surgery,
Yep.
the surgeon was in another room. It was like Dr. Octopus. He literally had arms,
Yeah.
and he had video game controllers.
Yep.
What they did was they just knitted everything together.
Wow. It's incredible.
Yeah, they cut my skin,
Yep.
knitted everything together, closed up my skin, sewed that together, and I never had to go back to get stitches. And the
Yeah.
next day, I mean, it hurt for a day.
Sure.
I slept in this, easy boy recliner.
Sure. Sure.
It hurt for about 2 days. I'll say 2 days.
Yep.
But by the third day, I was moving logs in the basement,
Wow.
in the backyard.
It's medical science, man.
Yeah.
That's why when I hear people talk about stuff like in the past, I get it. It's like, yeah, you're talking 20 years, 30 years. Yeah, but they're a lot different than today. Each time they're advancing. So think of it in that terms, like every 5 or 10 years,
Oh,
maybe
yeah,
even
I
10 years,
remember it was a
they're
big deal.
advancing on stuff.
When Elizabeth Taylor got a hip replaced, it was
Yeah.
a big deal, and she was
It was
walking around with a cane, and and
Yeah.
the end. Now you get your hip replaced. Literally, you're walking
Yeah.
that day.
I have like a cane. We ended up getting a cane. I had a walker. I didn't even use the walker. I was just using my cane. And then finally I've been able to walk, just walk. But the problem is that now my right side is just acting up really bad now. And so that's what's taking me out of it. Like today I had to go to the hospital, get some blood, and I'm getting in the car and stuff and had to get out again, and I'm just like, oh dude.
We're too nice for this to be house, right? House.
That's a show that I gotta watch. I remember years ago I watched maybe 1 or 2 episodes, and I just never got into House. But I want to watch it. I definitely, I put it on my checklist of things that I want to watch, catch up on.
So, since we just started talking of our medical woes, like,
I know we don't want to
in their
bore these people
50s.
with that stuff.
But first off, I got to let people know that I have a comic, Heroic Tales 2.
All
It's
right.
on my comic right now. We just hit $2,000. The stretch goals start unlocking at $3,000.
That's it.
Let's get those cards out. The cards are gorgeous. And then you got yourselves a project, Kaijus and Cowboys.
Yep, Kaijus and Cowboys. Yeah, we've been around. Like we have to pinch ourselves. We've been around for 5 years.
Yep, I got every issue.
We started back in 2020 with this crazy idea. Like, when me and Matthew first talked about it, I kind of didn't believe him. I was like, yeah, we had already worked on some stuff, and I was like, I don't know, dude. But then as we started talking about it, I said, you know what'd be really cool? It'd be nice to try to bring that flavor of the 80s kind of animation of storytelling, and then try to bring that kind of excitement and just have fun. I think that was the key thing with us. Like you and I, we were talking a little bit about the idea of how I think a lot of people put a lot of stakes on how much money you make,
Right.
on some of these campaigns and things like that. And it's like, it's not about that. Like to me, my mind is, I grew up as a child of the 70s and 80s. In the 80s, I went to a lot of cons, a lot of conventions, the early days. And I remember going to cons. There were guys be selling zines, and just, you could walk through the artist alley and stuff like that and pick up some fantastic stuff. It wasn't about the fact of how much money you made. It was about the fact of getting your stuff in the hands of readers. And then hopefully those readers will become invested in your story. And then they'll come back for more. And then the cycle continues. It continues. Money would never fit into that equation unless, again, once you start building up an audience, a viable audience. That means somebody who's consistent. They
Yeah.
like Ninja Turtles. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird are a fine example of what I believe, and of course some other people too, but they are the ones who I always hold to a high place where you had these two guys who created something that was different. They tried to approach Marvel, and then Marvel was like, and they said, okay, screw you, we're gonna do indie comics. And so they went out there, they went to cons, they put their book out. The book looked unusual. It was different. The concept was a different kind of concept, and they found their audience. They would go to cons and they probably sold 10 books one con, but then the next con, some people might have heard about it. They sold 20 more, and so on and so on. It began building because people started seeing it and reading it, and it became something where they were like, "We got to get more of it." That's the only thing I told him. I said, "Matt, that's what I want. I want people to invest in a book. I don't want people just buying something just to be like a spur of the moment kind of thing, and then they go, oh, I forgot, I don't care about it anymore, and then I'm sort of gone, because that doesn't help your story, especially when
Yeah.
you have a story like ours, which is going to 12 issues.
Yeah. Your book is good. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Let's see. Codgers and Cowboys is a sci-fi full color comic book, 22 pages, and what it is just about simple. The robots have gone to an alien world that's inhabited by kajus, and they want to take over. They want to take over the planet. Now the thing is that Codgers and Cowboys, from where me and Matthew first started, it's a much more larger story because the first story that we had was called Team KS1, which appeared in it came out on a Wednesday by Alterna Comics. We put some of those in there, where the story started on Earth, so it was going from an Earth point. But at the point where we're in Codgers and Cowboys, we're in the far future where humanity now exists on this. The last remnants of humanity exist on the Ark. It's being controlled by the Father Mind AI, and the Father Mind AI technically has sent these robots down to do settlements on this alien world where all these kajus live. And so, in a certain degree, the kajus are sort of fighting back against them. And then they have the hunter bots, which are, at this point, we're talking about Bwin, Hunterbot Bwin, who is sort of the protagonist, who is sort of going out and was sort of telling his story, where he's engaging these kajus and stuff, and going through his thing.
Yeah, it's fun. You are one of the most unique artists I've ever had. There's nobody like you. You know.
I've often joked. I said, because I see so many people talking about AI and how AI steals artwork and stuff like that. I have yet to see AI try to replicate my kind of style of artwork, because I was heavily influenced by Herb Trimpe
Yes.
and Jack Kirby, and those kind of artists who have a cartoony kind of style, and one that's just so unique and stuff like that. So I don't know how AI can really handle that. I haven't even seen AI try to even tackle Jack Kirby's kind of style. I see that they only deal with a certain style set that they can handle. But it would be interesting to see it if it could pull
Yeah,
up.
you need a
Yeah.
couple of hundred more guys with your style. You know, for the AI.
Well, see, that's the thing. We don't want to have a homogenized comic book industry, because that's not
Right.
what comic books are about. The comic books, I remember comic books when I walked into an LCS when I first started going. I remember being hit by so many different things. I remember seeing outlaw comics. I remember seeing underground comics, indie comics, and in the mainstream. And you saw all these unique styles. Each one told a different story. I tend to I still have zines from guys that have just what I call the ugly art, which is beautiful to me. It's ugly, but it's beautiful. It's the
Yeah.
raw, passionate, these
The
guys are hand
unpolished
lettering.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, you like the hand lettering, balloons in it, barely legible, but it tells a story about this artist and their passion for the craft. I love that stuff. I would never want to get rid of that.
Oh,
We need to have that as much as we have the
that
stuff of the
the
more cleaner
zines. That's
style.
I was into punk rock in the '80s,
Yeah,
and the guys would like interview bands
Yep.
and literally go down to the Kinkos. I don't even know if there's Kinkos around anymore. And
Yeah, I
photocopy
know. Where's Copy Coffee and Kinkles?
and they would go like I'd go to CBGB's, and then there would be
Yep.
guys like, hey, you want my zine?
Yeah. You
You know,
fold them
you
together? Yeah.
yeah, and you give them $1 or something like that. They were
Yeah.
they were just trying to make enough money to pay for the zine
Yeah.
and,
That's
and
it.
get in to see the band. It was fun.
Yeah.
I got a box of them somewhere.
Yeah.
Now I got to go look through it. I probably haven't looked through
Yeah.
it in 35 years.
Just to get that story out to people. And imagine that, like you just want to get the story out to people to read your story. Not filling your head with all this stuff of grandiose. I'm going to be making $6,000, $10,000. A lot of as many times when I look at campaigns like that, the first thought that goes through my mind as I see those large amounts of money, I go, taxes.
Yeah.
It's like that. The reality, like business, it's like taxes, distribution cost. It's like all that's wait. What is in the end? What is the person actually making as a profit?
Profit? What does that mean?
Exactly. That's the thing. A lot of people tend not to look at this
I'm just
because it
trying
is.
to pay. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
pay for the next issue. That's
yeah.
really all
It's
I
it's
want to do.
business. It's a business kind of thing. So you either have to be passionate. You gotta have the passion of just getting your story out in front of people to read it, and then hopefully build your audience from that. You either gotta have that, or you're just gonna be like very disgruntled if you just you make this money. You go, wow, where's all the money? I had to do packaging, I had to buy supplies, and then I gotta ship it out, and then taxes, because that I hardly ever see people talk about that stuff, the taxes, because you're gonna have to pay some taxes on that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's all those little things that play in there. That's why I'm like, you either gotta love it, you gotta love it so much that you're like, look, I'm just trying to get this out to folks to read.
I got to bring up the super chat because I very rarely get super
Oh
chat.
my
Mr.
god.
RRTNZ, he's always busting my balls. Your mom is so fat she outweighs the needs of the many. Star Trek joke. Have a blessed Easter. Happy Easter. Happy
Right
Easter.
on, man.
Woodrow. I haven't seen Woodrow in a while. Frankie, dude,
Yo, what's
good to
up?
see you,
What's
Woodrow.
up?
Poor giant monsters. They're an indigenous culture. Yeah.
I don't know. You're gonna have to read it. Well, see, that's the thing about Matthew. Matthew is the way we have our sort of synergy is that Matthew originally did an outline when we first was talking about it that back in 2020. Well, actually 2019. Matthew was like, he was like, Frank, he's like, I think I could tell a 12-issue story. And I said, 12 issues, huh? And he said, yeah. And I said, all right. So he gave me this outline of his idea of how the story is going to be plotted out. And I said, okay, cool. But in my mind, the back of my mind, I said, hey, I know how as time goes, things change. So I wasn't holding it. It was just a blueprint,
Right.
a template. But I was like, things are going to change. So at this point, when he sends me scripts, I'm surprised by the stuff that he's popping out. And then by being surprised by that, I love that because then it gets my creative juices going. So then
Do,
I
do
can
you have
add my yeah, I
do you
can
have
add my
input,
flavor to it.
do you have input in the story, or are you, as John Byrne used to say, the art robot?
I say that we're more closer to how Stan Lee and Jack Kirby was,
Okay.
where Stan Lee would write out and plot out stuff, and then I'll draw the thumbnails. I'll do thumbnails, and usually my thumbnails are pretty tight. And so once I do my thumbnails, they're pretty tight. I send them to him, and I also do notes. So the way I handle it is like I'll do my thumbnails, and then in the body of the email, I'll write down a breakdown of what everything means, and then
Okay.
he'll look at it, and if he finds something that he feels like it's not working, we'll discuss it, and then I'll make edits or whatever and such and such. But usually it's pretty spot on. I'll be like, well, yeah, this is what I was thinking. You wrote this, and usually the way Matthew writes, he's very open. He's very loose. Like he's just very open in how his writing style is and stuff. So it gives a lot of room for me to sort of play in there.
I just want to bring Old Dirty Fat. He says, well, those are running and managing. I can't even read anymore. Maybe I got to get surgery on my mouth.
That are running.
Well, those that are running and managing AI engines have already admitted to the theft. They are just trying to avoid being obvious at this time. Yeah, I got into a Twitter. I got into 2 Twitter arguments this
Oh
week.
Lord.
I admit I'm human and I admit that I have flaws. But one of them, a guy just refused to believe in the concept of IP, intellectual property.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, he's like, oh, so if I want to write a story about the Mona Lisa, I can't do it. I'm like, dude, you're picking hundreds of year old stuff.
Yeah.
I said, but and then I'm like, you can't just take a story about like Spider-Man. Oh,
Yeah.
so you care about the Disney Corporation's rights, but not. I'm like, dude, you know what I'm saying. But anyway,
I'm gonna tell every creator out there, every person out there that truly is a creator, and uh, that you have like this your own ability to create. That means writing, and then also people who are traditional artists who are able to draw, even digital, traditional but digital, who draw. We are at the John Henry moment. We're all John Henry against the locomotive. The locomotive is AI. It's
okay.
so think of it in that terms, because that's what I do. I think of myself as John Henry with that hammer, and they're saying, okay, who's gonna beat that old steam engine? And John Henry went at it with the steam engine, and he proved the fact that the human being, the tenacity of the human being to be able to stay in the game was very strong. And I think that sometimes we need to sort of take a step back and think in that terms. The best way that we'll be able to fight this thing is by proving to people that it can get done. That's why I tell every artist out there, if you can, do some short videos of you drawing your actual artwork. If you're traditional, show people that actual drawings are being done, or pictures. I would suggest small videos. If you got a phone or whatever, do a short little video of what you're drawing and stuff like that. Prove to people, because people need to see stuff. Because we're in an age where, seeing is to believe. Like, I don't know if you saw the recent was it Rob Liefeld? He just posted the thing about his somebody did a Young Blood,
Yeah.
and I guess it was AI done. And a lot of people was jumping on it, but it just shows you how like AI can literally create
Oh,
something.
I think we're a few years away before full-on AI movies in the movie
Yeah.
theater. Yeah.
But the thing is that does that mean the end of people who can actually draw
No,
or do stuff?
they'll always
No,
be that.
there's
They'll
always
always
going to
be.
be a need for that. People are going to always want that because it's so
I
different. It's
think
so
comic
unique.
books are dying, but there will always be people like us that want to make comic books.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the thing about it is that um, the mainstream comic books are an
I'll bring
IP
this back
farm.
up.
Yeah, they're an IP farm. That's what they are. We've
Right.
been knowing that for years. They're owned by corporations. Marvel and DC are IP farms that are just they're just farming off all these classic characters. I've always said that. Hey, look, indie comic books is the place where we need to be, where we're gonna see the sense of innovation come. But we got to keep maintaining that. The fact that people are still trying to keep hopes out for the big guys to somehow change, they're not going to change. They're making money. They're making money just putting IPs out, T-shirts, toys. Not even dealing with the films, the video game. I mean, what do these execs are sitting there going, yeah, we hear you, we hear your voices and whatever, but we're still making tons of money. Why should we change? So the thing is that innovation is going to have to come from down here in the trenches, and the trenches are us. We are in the trenches right now. We are the ones who are innovating new stories for the future. And
I
who knows who's going to become the next big thing? We don't know. We didn't. No one knew the Ninja Turtles would get that big.
right.
It was all by these weird events, like when they came across that guy. I can't think of his name, but he was a big licensing guy or what something who said those can make great toys. And then he hooked up with them, and then it just blew up from there. But those kind of things I believe can still happen. But first, you got to have a product to put out there. If you got to have the product, that means you got to have comic books coming out. I want to see long storytelling again come back. I think that's one of the big things that's hurt a lot of comic books is the fact that the short 4 issue format kind of thing, where it's almost like, okay, we did 4 issues and then you're gone. You know, we grew up, you and I grew up in a time when they were doing comic books long form. I
Right.
mean, where it was like, I was remember the X-Men. I remember John Burns' run on
Right.
Fantastic Four and many other people.
Yeah.
You
These guys
were,
had
yeah,
they had time to implement stories, subplot,
yes, yes,
resolve things. They could foreshadow something
yeah,
that he's been working this for a year.
yeah.
You know.
And you saw the journey of artists. Like people always looking at. I tell many artists out there, you're trying to seek perfection, but you need to go through the journey. I can tell you right now, Frank Miller's artwork, the way it looked in Dark Knight, was it Dark Knight Returns, was nothing compared to what he was doing way before.
Right.
Like nothing. If you look at you'd be like, wow, another artist did this. No, that was Frank Miller when he first started out in Marvel working on stuff, and then look where he got to that point. Same thing, Mike Mignola. Mike Mignola's work looks totally different. His
Oh,
starting
look at
off
his
stuff,
work on Rocket Raccoon.
yeah.
He
It's
did
all these
a
different
four-issue Rocket
people.
Raccoon series. It was not the best, and now I
John
love Mike.
Byrne.
Yeah,
Look at John Byrne's early stuff as compared to where he went. The thing about storytelling is about the journey. It's about seeing these artists and writers and seeing how they grow. The When you do long form writing, you can see sometimes it's going to be a story where you go, that was a kind of weak story, whatever. But you knew that there's always going to be another story that's going to follow, and that story might be even be a great one. If you're like, wow, okay, so we got no, 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 and then you go, whoa, man, the story started picking up. That's how it was, and I think that we need to kind of bring a little bit of that back.
I agree. I agree. We got to give. I say we got to reduce the price of comics. I'm talking
Yes,
mainstream,
yes,
and then get rid of just a clean slate. Get rid of all the editorial
yeah.
staff. Get guys that care about it, guys who want to be lifers, and give the creative team time to develop.
You're never at this point. You're never gonna get that from the
I
way the
know.
mainstream now. So well,
I'm on
I think
Toby.
we had this discussion before. I said I
I'm on
love.
Toby asking for Pixies
I'm
and
totally with you on that, but I've come to that point where it's like you and I both be like Dustin. I'll be Dustin dreadlocks at that time, and I don't think that. I think it'll still be going on because they're corporations now. That's the reality. The reality is that they're corporations. I look at stuff like Godzilla, right? I love Godzilla, but the problem is that Godzilla is a corporate
yeah.
legacy IP, and they're squeezing every ounce out of Godzilla, everything. You're seeing Godzilla in every single thing you can, and eventually, people will get bored with it. So now, like for us putting out Kajus and Cowboys, we're just riding that little wave of people, the interest of Kajus and things like that, while it lasts, and hopefully people can look at it and be like, okay, well we like this kind of IP, maybe our IP, and maybe they'll stick with us and with the story and stuff like that, so that we can survive a little bit another day to be able to hang in there. But I'm already seeing an IP that I really enjoy, like Godzilla, and it's just being squeezed,
I
squeezed.
last 10 years I've been watching all my favorite stuff, all my
Yeah,
favorite. Just
all being
it's
squeezed.
it's like duck. When they shoot the ducks and they just drop down. I'm watching all
Yeah,
the ducks just
yeah.
drop. Doof, doof, You know.
But the positive in it is that it motivated you to become a creator,
Yeah.
right? So that
Yeah.
you can now tell these stories, and I think that's the key thing that we all have to look at, is that don't just get angry. And oh no, no, yeah, you can get angry, but use that anger as something
Channel that
positive.
anger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take the anger and use it as a positive and do something. Like make your own comic book, tell your own story. Put it out there.
I just want to address Old Dirty Fatty's comment. I don't mind them using creative technology that does all the manual labor, but it seems they are focusing on replacing the creative people. As a guy who does manual labor,
Yeah.
I'm like, I think that we're in more threat. Like right now, we
Yep.
don't see it because they don't make affordable robots yet.
Yep.
But I guarantee you,
Yep.
within 10 years, on every construction site, there's going to be robots that are lifted up carrying,
You want to watch?
you know what I mean? And they're going to,
You want to watch a really good movie? I tell anybody right now in the chat, you want to watch a really good movie on the theory of the idea of AI and robots and stuff. Watch Wall-E from Disney.
yep.
That's a fine example of where humanity may end up going. Because the thing is that human beings, we need to still be doing stuff. That's just it. We need to be doing. That means, man, we need to be doing something. That's why I love the idea of cybernetics and bionics, because it's more in the sense of or like Sigourney Weaver when she got into the giant robo soup and so that's a human being operating a mech.
Right.
That can my mind can wrap around that. I go, it's a machine, it's a tool. Human beings can function in it. Or like cybernetics, like say if God forbid someone lost an arm, you get a cybernetic arm, a bionic arm. Maybe that bionic arm can have attachments on it and stuff, and this person could be able to drill with it or whatever. It's all these. Those are the kind of stuff that I wish that we could sort of put our minds to developing stuff that can enhance humanity, human beings' capabilities. So that we can have people that could climb up, things, and if somebody's in mountains lost, or climb up the friggin' mountain or whatever, certain attachments or devices. That's what I like. The whole
Well,
idea of
you were
yeah,
talking about like sitting in depression, stuff like that.
yeah,
Maybe I'm naive because I've never been like everybody goes through a period of
yeah,
but I'm talking about clinically depressed people.
Yeah.
I'm starting to wonder, like, I think people, if they're lost, they become depressed. Like the human being is meant to be doing something. It's meant to be challenged.
Yes.
I'm not going to
Yes.
say it's meant to create, but it's meant to be challenged.
Yes.
Throughout human history, we were competing for food. We were competing against other tribes for food. We were competing against people within our tribe for access to reproduction and food and things like that. Now, like it or not, things are so easy right now that I think our body has this desire for competition, for whatever, for conflict resolution, and we're not doing. So I think depressed people, like, go out and learn to draw, write poems, you do something creative. I think that'll overcome that depression cycle that people get into.
When I learned,
I've never been depressed, and if anybody's truly depressed and offended by it, that's not my point. That's my theory.
Last year, when I learned that when I got the diagnosis for osteoarthritis in both of my hips, I looked at I had a moment of that, what I call my Iggy's. I don't feel like it's depression for me, but it's more like I had those moments where it just put in perspective, where I looked at my wife and I said, I didn't marry my wife or be in a relationship with my wife to become a burden to her.
Right.
I'm gonna be straight up with you.
That's
I'm old school.
Thing,
and my first thought was like, I was like, the hell am I gonna be stuck in a wheelchair and allow that to happen? If there's a chance for me to stand on my own two legs, my own 2 feet, and be able to move. I said, there's no way in hell that's happening.
I was like, I want to go first, and then my wife can sell my comic collection.
Yeah.
I mean,
I said no.
I don't plan on profiting off my comic collection.
I said I got a lot more years in this vehicle, and so I'm not about to just roll over and be like, oh, I got to get a wheelchair, because that was the option. They were like, well, yeah, you don't have to get a surgery, but guess what? I'll be hobbling around, and most likely by the age of 60, I'm turning 55 this year. 5 more years, I'll be in a wheelchair. Yeah. How does that help? How does that help my wife?
My hiney, nobody wants that.
Yeah, no one wants that. I'm like, I didn't marry my wife to become a burden at 60 years old, man. Come on, at 55. I'm like, as soon as they talked that, I said, dude, when can we get underneath the knife? Why are we still talking? Get me in there quick. Get those knives all sharpened up.
That's what I said to my wife. If I go blind, or if I lose my hands or my mind, feel free to push me down the steps.
Yeah. Gives a nice little kick.
No kick. Let's check out your campaign now. I brought it up earlier, but we were talking. So this is Kaiju's Kai. I'm going to play you trailer, okay?
All right, there you go. Matthew did this trailer, by the way. Wow.
There you go.
Wow. Look at Matthew did that. Cool. And it's kind of fun. I like the fact that I'm happy to see him start to express his own, like, he's the writer, but I like the fact that he's expressing his own creativity and doing these videos. I love that. Like, to me, I'm all about just creativity. I'm used to working, like, years ago when I was doing work in animation and in production, and as well as advertising. Thank you, Brian. I loved working in a studio element with various people. I love different creatives working, everybody kind of bouncing ideas off each other. I love that stuff, and I love to see the interesting stuff that comes from different people. And so for him, he's just expressing a part of his creativity, so he's able to do these videos. And I said, have fun with it, bro. It's weird. Sorry.
I was just I look at your art, and first off, it's so colorful. It almost like reminds me of like stained glass. You know?
Yeah. Even when I look at my work, I'm always surprised by that I drew it. And the funny thing is that I've always been one of those artists where I try to push the envelope and what I'm doing. Like I'll say right now to everybody in the chat, like I'm already on issue 8. That was one of the big things that when me and Matt was talking about Kaizen Cowboys, one of the big things was I said, look, Matt, we need to have a viable production schedule, and when we do these campaigns, the books have to be done.
Right.
That means that we need to be ahead of the board on getting the books out, because the thing is, I don't want people waiting months to
I
years
say the same thing.
for our books. This is a business. When you start asking people for money, this is a business. And the thing about it is that you need to be able to get a product out at a reasonable time to people. So what we did, we went back and forth and we said, well, what can we possibly do? And he said, well, maybe we can try to do 2 books a year. And I said, okay, let's. If we're gonna do that, then we got to be cranking. I gotta be ahead of that. So if you say two
Right.
books a year, I have to be somewhere around at least 3 books ahead of this thing, so that so that there's never a point where, say, if something like my surgery,
Yeah. Say if you need to get your hips
yeah,
replaced,
something comes up
or you're
where I
thinking,
can't.
yeah, yeah,
And I told him another thing too was I said, look, man, I said I'll be straight up with you. I said I made a promise to myself and to the fans that are enjoying this, that I'm gonna be the artist on this. So the idea
oh,
of
you
having,
can't change. That would be too
yeah,
drastic if you left.
I told him that because he, Matthew at that point he had brought up early on. He had brought up the idea of, he's like, well, we could bring a guest on. I said no. I said no, 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 no. I said this isn't about ego or anything. I said I am committed to get this done. I think that the thing is that I'm old school. I remember when the artists that I loved and cared for, would work on comics, and they would get those comic books done. Yeah, they would get them done. I don't know how they did it monthly, but they got it done. And the thing about it is that I feel like the people who are taking the time to go to our campaign and they're gonna put their money down to back it, then I need to show that loyalty. We need to show the loyalty that that we're gonna be consistent in getting them a product done by the artist who's part of it. Period.
Plus, you're too unique. If you had
Yeah.
to fill an issue of somebody else, it would be too
Yeah. How could
jarring.
they mimic that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say this: your art, would this be a fair description? It's Mobius meets like street graffiti.
Wow. I've never heard that, but hey, I'll take it. I've heard my work, like people have said clearly, they say like Jack Kirby, a Kirby-ish kind of feel to it. I've said that it's a mixture of a little bit of that, of like Kirby. I love John Byrne. I also love Herb Trimpe, and
Yeah,
I've
you
mentioned that
mentioned
many
Herb.
times.
You're
I got
like
to meet. Yeah,
you're
I'm
like
sorry.
the alkaline of Herb Trimpe. I've never
I
heard anything
love
of that guy.
I got to meet Herb Trimpe. I got to tell him how much Shogun Warriors and Godzilla impacted my life. And this was before he passed away. I got to give him some artwork and talk to him and stuff
You
and
know
tell him. I
what?
even called him dad. I was like, "You're my father, man." And I said, and he was just like, he was like almost like, it was weird, man. It gets me. It always gets me because the way he looked at me, because I was like I'm some kid who grew up in the projects, man. And your work, when I saw your book, it impacted me in a way where I was like, I can do this. And I said, you need to hear this, because this is what your art did. And he just was like, wow, man, serious. I said, yeah, I did. My whole career is based off of a comic book, that your work that I saw, and then I saw your other work. And I'm glad I had that chance to be able to tell him, took a picture with him and stuff like that. So to me, working on this book is an homage, definitely to Herb Trimpe, because I love that sense of fun. I love that sense of color, exaggeration. I love those comic books that had that. They were escapism. They weren't supposed to be these serious, hardcore kind of things. They
You
were
know what?
about, yeah.
Why isn't this coming? Oh, there we go. When you were
Ah,
talking
there you
about
go.
that,
Look
now
at
that
that.
I'm looking at this,
Look at that.
now I see it.
Yeah, look at that.
Now I see your
Yeah,
yeah,
bright,
I can-
vibrant colors. Look at the
the
energy in
shape,
that.
the
Look at how the
design.
robots are standing over the city. Like even the size. Like if you look at the Shogun Warriors, for example, and see this, you got me going now. You open
Yeah,
them up. There's scenes in there where the size of the robots are like the size of the entire city. But then the next picture, they would be like down to the size of buildings. I love that, because back
it's
then we
funny.
didn't. we
now
didn't
I'm looking
hyper,
at this and I see
yeah,
your work.
we didn't hyper criticize back then or hyper critique.
Right.
We just accepted the art. Sal Buscema is another good one. We would there was never this sense of like, oh my God, his arms too long. The arm, the
Yeah.
perspective was all. We were just like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. Look at that. That's robots and the energy. That's all you cared about.
I know. I see these people criticize other people's artwork, and I'm like,
Yeah,
you guys never
yeah.
read comic books.
hmm
You guys never read comic books.
Look at the color.
Every issue there was something wrong. I mean, okay, if you
Yeah,
spend 6 years making a comic book and then there's an egregious error, that's one thing.
yeah.
But like, knock it off. Most of you guys are nitpicking, and you're not comic book fans
This
because
is the comic that I saw. My mom took me to Child World in Dedham, Massachusetts. And I remember I was all excited because I was going there to get like Shogun Warrior figures from Mattel. And I was all like, and then I remember walking through the door and it was a spinner rack. Oh, I'm getting all excited now.
yeah, get excited, man. That's the best.
All right. I took some Tylenol.
There you go.
I saw, dude. I'm telling you, my mom took me there. I was all excited. First, she was taking me. I was getting some Shogun Warriors, but there was a spinner rack in Child World through the door, and I remember I was like, I want some comics. So I went over to it, man. Started spinning it around, and I remember seeing that comic right there. It was in a pack of 10 comics, and I was like, and I think it was like $5. I think it wasn't some insane price for 10 comics.
Right.
And I remember I was like, Ma, get it. Please, Ma. I was begging. She was like, all right, boy, here you go. And she said, grab that, put in the carriage. I remember
Are you
grabbing
gonna be
that.
good? Are you gonna do your homework, Frank?
Oh, I always was good. I was good. So I got that, and then I think I got some of the 3-inch Shogun Warriors figures because they didn't have at the time. They didn't have the other ones that I really wanted. Like I think I got some of them around.
Yeah,
But
they're
the
like
three,
2 foot tall plastic.
no,
ones.
no, actually there was the 5-inch. That's what it was. The 5-inch, and then there's 3-inch. The 3-inch were the little tiny guys, and then there was the 5-inch that could transform a little bit, and then you had
Yeah.
the really big ones. But at the Child World, they had like they just had the small 3-inch ones. So I grabbed that, man. I grabbed a few of those, and then I remember as soon as I got home, the plastic tore it off. There was some other comics in it, Spider-Man or whatever, some other stuff. But the Shogun Warriors, oh man, it
So,
was just beautiful. Look at the colors.
Creative Outlet wants to know the important questions. What's the best Shogun Warrior, and why is it Vanguard Ace?
Why? I love Vanguard Ace because I always identify. I felt Vanguard Ace looked like me because he had lips. He looked very Egyptian to me. And then I remember watching Force 5, and on Force 5, I always thought Vanguard Ace's story was a very to me, if somebody was to say do a film, I think it would be a much more easier film because it talked about these pilots that had to learn how to pilot. Like they built Vanguard Ace to battle against this other human guy who wanted to, who was kidnapping all these scientists to go on this, to build a spaceship to go to this planet to steal all its resources. Pretty much that. And then the good guys were like, okay, we have these fighter pilots who have to learn all these different unique ways of flying to battle this guy. And then eventually they built Vanguard Ace as a form to fight against this guy's evil robots. And I was like, yeah, I can get that. It wasn't too far fetched. It was like, wow. And the guy who created Vanguard Ace, Leiji, I think his name Leiji Masamoto. He was the guy who did Star Blazers, Battleship
I love
Yamato.
Star Blazers.
So
God.
if you that he, although I learned years later that he did not like Vanguard Ace, which made me kind of sad about it a little bit. But again, Star Blazers, dude, every time, remember the scene in Star Blazers when they're leaving Earth and everybody gets to say goodbye to the people, to Earth, whoever you care for, you say goodbye, and they only have like a few minutes to say it because then once they leave Earth orbit, then they can't speak to anybody else. What is that one scene where Windstar, I think his name was Windstar in the American version, he goes in and he sits in front of the monitor and stuff, and he's kind of slumped in his chair, and then the woman comes in, the girl comes in, and she goes, Windstar, what's going on? Why don't you don't you have somebody to talk to and whatever? And he's there for a minute, then he just bursts up and he goes, I have no one to talk to, no one. And he just rushed. And I remember crying, man, because it's sad because he has nobody. And then
Wild Star, yeah.
Wild Star, that's right, Windstar. Windstar was on Vanguard Ace, I'm sorry, because they were the same characters technically. And so he runs and then he meets up with the captain of the ship. and the captain's by himself too, and the captain lost his family because of the Vegans, and the captain's like, yeah, he's like Windstar, Wildstar, Windstar, what
Wild
is
Star.
Wildstar? He says Wildstar. He's like, it's okay. He gives him this whole talk about like how he lost his family and that now they're a family, and that the reason why they're going off to space is so that they can protect Earth against the Vegans and a whole bunch of other stuff. But man, I remember that being so impactful when I saw. I was just like, oh my god, it's, you know, as a little kid just crying like, wow, that's so sad. He has no one, but now he has his new family on the ship.
Yeah,
Oh,
Stargazer Steve was one of the best. They were off to outer space.
oh man. Well, it's funny. I posted a video because I was watching a little bit of Gogo 13, and I said these are the animations I grew up with. And I remember how animations were grittier, more adult. They were like adult entertainment. Like the feeling of them, like they had adults in it. Like they weren't kids. Like there would be a little kid in the show or whatever, but the shows just had a very adult feel to it, and the way it was like the music was always on point. I remember the music always being great, and then also just the feeling of how it was. It was like much more darker, richer colors.
I
It had.
just remember back then it was harder to see these Japanese cartoons.
I was part of an anime club.
Yeah, I remember. I'm so old. I remember it was called Japanimation back then.
Yeah, Japanimation. But I was
Yeah,
part of
we
an
didn't
animation club
anime.
in
I
Boston.
remember getting corrected later on. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever.
I
But
remember going on every, it was every weekend of the month or something. We would go meet up at some place, at a college, various colleges and stuff around Massachusetts. And they would be like, all right, they would give us scripts. This is how detailed these guys were.
oh
They would
wow,
give us scripts of what the anime was so that we could see the English version of it. And I didn't care. Like I would watch stuff and I would sort of get the gist of the story. But I was watching all kind of crazy like anime and stuff. Like I was like, oh my god, this is incredible, you know. But I just remember like anime had like I always call it noir. You know how the noir kind of I call it more noir where it had like heavy shadows, lots of adults. That's what I kind of miss with a lot of anime of today, where it's just there's an atmosphere to it. The music was always like either jazz or beautiful. It was like this beautiful hardcore music or whatever, really well done stuff, and it was just very serious. It had a very serious tone to a lot of stuff, like Gogo 13, Crying Freeman. Ah, Japanimation. That's
yeah,
right,
yeah.
classic.
Yeah, Go 13 was.
Oh,
I remember trying to collect those books. Those back in the 80s. I don't know if you remember, but I think it was Eclipse Comics brought
yes,
over.
yes,
They brought over Gen 13, not Gen 13, Barefoot Gen.
yep, yep. I remember
Barefoot
that.
Gen. There was Area 88, My the Psychic Girl, uh,
Yes. Oh my
Lone
God.
Wolf, Lone Wolf and Cub,
Yep.
and there was a few others. And those were the first. Like I saw all the cartoons like Star Blazers and stuff like that.
Oh, dude. Oh, then
I read
Robotech
all
came.
the
Then
pilots.
Robotech came along. I remember seeing Robotech. It was on this thing, Channel 68 in Boston, and it just hit me. Like I remember watching it, going, "Oh my God, this is incredible." It was like Robotech was. Oh, dude, come on, look at that hip hop
Frankie D,
record.
like a hip hop record, love your work.
Well, I'll tell you one
Monumental
thing. I remember back in
And
the day.
Monumental Comics is check out his stuff too. I don't want to sell him short. He does
I
some good stuff too.
I remember back in the day when I was doing security late at night, coming home late night, and I'd be on the orange line. And one of the things I was hear is these cats, they'll be like dudes or whatever on the orange line and freestyling, man. Like hip hop, rap music back then was so much fun, man. That was the age of breakdancing, and you're correct. I was a big fan of graffiti. I love the sense of people just putting artwork out there, and then you wouldn't even know who the person was. They just would just do their thing. They would just put out just like in New York. When you go up to New York, you see all these beautiful like crazy like graffiti and stuff like that, and all these you know of just these people doing stuff, just putting out artwork, freestyling it, not caring about whatever about what people are thinking about it. It's just like I just got to do my thing, and I feel like that's where you got innovation, because people were just like they weren't restrained by the sense of well I got to be perfect. It wasn't about being perfect. It was just about the fact that you were doing your thing. And then if you continue doing your thing and you enjoyed what you were doing, then your whatever your skill set was, it would just grow from there. You know? And I hope that we get sort of like a renaissance of that coming back. And I think we are. I think we're starting to see
Are you
people.
still? Are you in Boston now?
No, 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 I'm a Rhode Island guy now.
Okay, I was gonna say because I'm back in Manhattan for the first time in 6 years. I don't see graffiti anymore.
No, no, man. I remember going to Manhattan back in the olden
Every
days. I
yeah,
remember the olden days of Times Square.
I
Yes,
it,
the
yeah,
grittiness.
I
Yeah,
remember the subways. Like if
yep,
anybody go on, I don't even know like old TV now. I don't even
yeah,
know what channel. But watch Welcome Back, Kotter. Just watch the
yep.
beginning of it. It
Oh, this
used
is
to
it.
just be all the subway trains covered in
Yep,
graffiti and everything.
graffiti all over the place.
I
But
don't
I-
see
but
any graffiti anymore.
no, no, no. I don't even know if this generation of kids even do graffiti like that. I don't
Well,
know if
you know
it's like
what?
a
They got to get outside off their ass and stop playing video games. How's that for an old man
you
talk?
know that. Well, that's the thing. It's like back then when we grew up, we had to
Hey,
use our
pops.
imagination. Hey, what's going on? We had to use our imagination. Think about it. Like we would go, me and my buddies, we would go to martial arts movies and stuff, and we would come out of it seeing the Shaw Brothers and things like that, and act it out and be like, oh, and our minds were just burning, bustling with just like all kind of crazy ideas and stuff like that. That's where that whole thing of just creativity would come from. For me, it would be drawing. Like I would see something and be like, "Oh my god, I gotta draw this!" And I just saw some dude just chop a guy's head. Oh my god, I can create a mon. If you're not getting these kind of different kind of thing stimulations and stuff, then what's gonna happen? Sure enough, the last dragon. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. I gotta
I
watch that. Now you reminded me. I gotta watch that again,
I
man.
got to reread my Shogun Warriors.
Oh, you do, man. I'm telling you, Herb Trimpe. And what kills me is that I remember I had owned at one point like 40 pages of original Shogun Warrior pages. Because I think a lot of people don't know. Like I had my eBay shop at one point. I back in the early mid no not mid 2000 or no early 2000s. There was a point where I was working. I was doing a lot of work, but then I some stuff had slowed down, and so a buddy of mine was like, "Well, Frank, why don't you jump on eBay and just sell artwork?" And I did. I started selling a ton of artwork, and then I was like, "Man!" Once things started speeding up for advertising, and then I was like, "You know what? I like artwork, so I'm gonna buy artwork." So I turned it to flipping. One of my biggest deals that I ever did on eBay was I beat this dude out, man. Oh, it was amazing. It was like Shane Glein, and I don't know if anybody in the chat, they probably do know Shane Glein. Shane Glein is like this famous artist who worked on Kim Impossible. He did a lot of design on Kim
Okay.
Impossible, Batman animated series, and a couple other animated shows. And he decided to sell a ton. When I say a ton, a ton of those artwork pieces, like a lot of those pieces. And so what happened was I got into a battle with this dude, man, on eBay, and I took it. It was for 2 grand, 2 grand at the time, and I beat this dude out, man, and I fought for it, and I got these amazing pieces, and then I flipped pretty much all of them, and I made a ton of money off of that. It was amazing. I remember having like Batman, like just drawings of Batman stuff from the animated show and stuff like that. But then also I knew that I wanted to own original artwork too that I really loved, and I started searching for a lot of Shogun Warrior stuff, and I did. At one point, I had a ton of original Shogun. Herb Trimpe signed stuff. I had Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan, I had lived in Massachusetts somewhere. I can't remember where, but he sold me some pieces of his DP7 because I was a huge DP7 fan, and I had a lot of original pieces from DP7 and just a ton of other stuff. But before I moved to Rhode Island, I had my home and was going through a divorce, my first wife and stuff, and so that was a bad time. That was my Iggy moment, in which things got really bad and I had to get rid of stuff, and I just wasn't in the right state of mind. I was selling a lot of good stuff, especially my Shogun Warrior stuff,
Oh
and
man.
that still pains me today. Like I still have Herb Trimpe drew me a Godzilla piece, like the headshot of Godzilla. I still have that, and I still have like a sketch card that he did of Ray Dean, and I still have that, and that's the one I'm holding on to. But I have my moments where I'll reflect on the stuff I had from those pages, and I go, oh man, it was just painful. I don't know if I'll ever. I haven't seen them pop up. Whoever owns them, I feel like they're gonna hold on to them. DP7, someone just posted. Yeah, I had like some really good. I had like a I don't know if anybody remembers DP7. The page when what's his name was being brought into the on a stretcher. what's his name?
I don't know the
Mastodon.
comics, but I'll be damned if I remember it that well.
Yeah, I love Dave Ryan. Was it Paul Ryan? Dave Ryan? No, what was his
Paul
name?
Ryan.
Paul Ryan. I love Paul Ryan's work. I think he's another one of those artists that you don't hear about. He's one of the greats, just like Frank Robbins. I've mentioned
Oh, Frank
online about Frank.
Robinson's
I
awesome.
know. I mentioned online about Frank. People, oh, Frank who? And I'm like Frank Robbins.
Or
I'm like,
another one, Frank Bruner is another one who's
oh, Bruno too. I know. It's like these great artists who are kind of in obscurity now, where they were tremendous artists, illustrators, man, who could draw emotion. Yup, Mastodon. I had that splash page. Sold it. I mean, it helped. I mean, I've said as a collector myself, a collector always has to understand that there is gonna come a point. Like, I mean, you collect, but then if times ever get rough, you got to do what you got to do. So I think every collector, hardcore collector, understands that it's an investment.
I
And
tell
hope.
you,
Yeah.
the only original art that I have now is like for my own comic, and
Hmm.
then our mutual friend Brian Bow.
Yep.
I got some original art from him. I got
Yep.
a Josh Howard, but it's it's tempting and it's expensive, and I will not look at eBay because I know I'll spend way too much money for a Jack Kirby page. You know,
Oh, a buddy of mine got a Jack Kirby page years ago. Years ago, and he paid $300 for it. It was for like some a comic, like a splash page from one of the Star Comics or something. Was it Star Comics? Some character like that. But was like Frank. Cause I remember we were at the con and he came up to me and he said, Frank, should I get it? And I said, dude, don't procrastinate out of it. You should get it. I don't know if he still has it. I hope he still does. But it was a beautiful splash page done by Jack Kirby of some unknown character, one of those rare characters that he drew.
I
Now,
went. There's there's I don't know what it is, but out by me there's a lot of retro places.
yep.
It's like a little flea market. This guy selling jeans, this guy selling whatever postcards, and what's that?
Oh, just so everyone
Oh,
knows,
Ultraman. Okay.
well, the thing about it is that I have a ton of stuff on my eBay shop right now. If anyone's interested in getting original artwork and stuff, so I got a bunch of cards and stuff is available as well. I want people. I said it out loud. I said, look, I want people. I'm an artist, so I want my artwork to be in people's collection. And so if people want to have artwork, then come on by, come on by and get some of this artwork.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a good one. This is a creature from, I believe, Godzilla, the Godzilla series, Marvel Comics. Recreated, and this is actually on 32 point cardstock, so it's really good. I love this cardstock. So there you go.
There you go. You can click on the link right there.
So yeah, I'm a big fan of original artwork.
I said there's a collectible place by me, and the guy sells
Yep.
old comics.
Yep.
He also has a big box of original art pages, and I
Oof.
started looking through it, and I'm like, I
Ooh.
recognize some of this,
Yeah.
and I stopped because I felt that like lust and greed start to rise in my body,
Yep.
and I'm like, I can't
There's
look
something
more.
about that because think about it. You're owning something that was done by this artist.
Right.
Like
And I consider that
yeah,
legit American art, like
yeah,
comic book art
that's history.
museums.
That's
That's
history.
Roy Lichtenstein stuff. I'm talking Jack Kirby, Sal
Yeah.
Buscema, you know.
I've had artwork where I've seen like coffee stains on them, man. I love that stuff. I love a page that looks like it's been worked on. Like when they used to paste down the lettering.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember some of those Shogun Boy pages. The lettering was sort of almost peeling off and stuff like that. I love a page that looked like it's been worked on. I don't want something that's overly clean and stuff like. No,
And old Jack Kirby Superman when they put a Kurt Swan face on it.
yeah,
Jack Kirby didn't draw the
yeah.
face.
All the whiteout.
Yeah.
You see all the whiteout. That's production artwork. Production artwork should never look like it's super clean. It should be like you see those little errors because that means that it's showing you that as a human being,
A human being
we
worked on this.
yeah, a human being we're not perfect creatures.
Right.
So that means that there's going to be mistakes on it and stuff like that, and that's what you're buying. You're buying into that. You're buying that a human being worked on this, and that now you own something that nobody else owns. That's the bragging rights of collectors. That's the high that I get, where I go, yeah, I own something that, yeah, you got a comic book from, but I own the original artwork. I was watching the Toys That Make Me, and they were talking about He-Man, and I was salivating, man, when they started showing the original drawings of He-Man, and I was like, oh my god, man.
I
I
there's a
said,
hero.
oh, I
I
would
don't
do
know who the
anything.
artist's
Oh,
name is. If anybody in the chat knows, but
oh,
I love that Hero Quest game. It's
oh,
and that artwork with the barbarian and the sword.
yeah.
They showed the original art.
Oh,
Oh my god, man!
that's what you want. That's
That's
what I mean.
that's American art. That should be in a museum.
The only thing I would say that would match that would be like the mold, like the actual sculpture of the actual like the prototype figure. Then that's when I go, okay, yeah, that's where, and have it signed by the artist who molded it. That would be like worth. See, that's what I mean. I'm a collector. As much as an artist, that collector part of me is like, to me, value is in the stuff like that's super valuable.
I
You
went
know.
to a Dungeons Dragons convention. I went to Gary Con out
Oh.
in Lake Geneva. Was it Wisconsin? And they had original artwork from all
Oh.
like the monster manuals and
Oh.
oh
Oh.
my god!
I
I
know.
had I had one. If anybody's familiar with the DD's Demigods, Thor, drawn by Jeff D, $150. It's in my
You should have
hand.
went for it, man.
I, but
You
the
kicking
reason why
yourself
I
for
didn't
that
do
one.
it, Jeff D and I had words, and he threatened to sue me years ago because I used the Villains of Vigilante logo on my forum without his permission.
Uh,
Dude, you gonna sue me? I'm making no money.
yeah.
So I was. He just put us. But I kind of regret that. I should have bought that.
Hey, look at, I had procrastinating moments too. There's a lot of stuff I regret. Like I remember going to. Remember when New York used to have Madison Square Garden cons?
Yeah,
There was a con that me and my buddies we went to that had Clive Barker. This was early in the days. Like Clive Barker was there, and I remember my buddy, because my buddy was super excited. He was a Clive Barker fan, and I remember hanging with him, and I was kind of like, yeah, yeah, Clive Barker, Hellraiser, and so I didn't, I didn't have as much enthusiasm to see Clive Barker that my buddies did. So I was like, I'll see him, and I didn't, and I regret that. I didn't go to those, and it was literally at the time. This is the time when you didn't have all this weird security and whatever. You could just walk up to people to the tables and just be like, "Hey,
right.
what's up?" And sort of. I did that with John Ritter Jr. I remember meeting John Ritter Jr. back in the '80s, at a creation convention in
I remember.
Boston, and I remember like he was sitting there in a chair and stuff, and he was built. He always worked out and stuff, and he was just young and everything and a bit. And I was like, hey man, I said I really enjoyed your work and stuff, and I said, as a young kid, I'm all like, yeah, yeah, he's really cool. And he's like, oh, thanks, man. And we started just rapping, just talking to him, man. And it was just like, and he was like, well, you're gonna, make something of yourself. Just keep going, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, thank you very much, man. He patted me on my head and said, get the hell out of here, kid. Nah, he didn't do
And he
that.
walked away. He was like, "Damn it! I almost sold something."
And then Kevin Eastman. No, no. Actually, I think I did buy something. I think I bought like a comic book. I never. That's one of my golden rules is that if you go to somebody and you start talking to them, then you gotta get something,
Right.
man. Come on. I,
Yeah.
I don't understand people who just do the whole like standing by a table and then you talk to someone and tell them the whole and you don't get nothing.
Yeah.
I've never. That's not my thing, man. When I would go to cons, I would always walk away with stuff, man, because you just got to do it.
Yeah.
It's just you don't just hang there at someone's table and not get anything. That's kind of weird, man. And I met Kevin Eastman too. I remember years ago at another con, and I did a lot of cons back in the day, back in the '80s and '90s. I was doing a ton of cons, and I met Kevin Eastman, and I was excited. I remember drawing him a Leonardo. I think I was in art school at that point. I drew him a Leonardo, and I presented it to him. Like he was right at the table, and I said, "Hey," I said, "Kevin," I said, "I just want to." I was all nervous. Like, Kevin, can I just give you this? And he said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Wow, this is pretty cool." And I was like, "Oh, thank you very much." And I was like, "I'm really inspired by you." And he's like, "Oh, no problem, man." He said, "Don't worry, man." He said, "What are you?" And I'm like, "I'm in art school, my first year." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, just you gotta hang at it. Don't give up." That kind of thing. Gave me the pep talk,
Yeah.
and that was it. But it was a great kind of moment. He was right at at that point where you could talk to artists. You could rap to them about stuff, and it wasn't all weird, and you'd have like handlers all around and all that stuff.
I conventions. Most of the artists have been good. The only one who ever was Neil Adams. Had like a security. He had like plastic boundary. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
he always tended to have a ton of tables too. I
yeah.
remember, like he
Like
would have
first
like a
table was
ton
a
of tables.
barricade, but everybody else was really cool.
Yeah,
You know, to
George
the point,
Perez was
like, as
cool.
you walking by, they were like, "Hey, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah."
I like George Perez. I like George Perez.
Oh,
When I
he was the best and
Yeah,
easy. I got
he's the
intimidated. He
nicest
was like,
guy,
"Calm
man.
down, I'm just a person." He signed my Wonder Woman. He
Yep,
signed a couple of comics. He was
yep,
the and I didn't get the feeling that he was trying to get me to leave. You know what I
yeah.
mean? He just like I don't know what a likable guy.
I had one moment where I got to hang with the big dogs when I was doing some work with, remember Stephen Hughes with Brian Polito, Lady
Yeah,
Death. All
yeah.
right, Stephen Hughes, unfortunately, he passed away, but his wife Barbara, she was working with this other woman who I did a comic book, my own personal comic book, my creator-owned comic book called Peace. People in Boston. I still have people that come up to me and they go, "Yo, I remember Peace, man, back in the day." It was this comic book that I did, and so she was like, "Hey Frank, I'm doing this comic book company called Bitch Press, and would you like to, have your comic as part of our thing?" And I was like, "Sure, whatever." And she was like, "Okay, well, we're gonna be at San Diego Comic Con." And so I was like, well, I'm gonna be doing a trip with my girlfriend at the time in Italy, and Italy and Greece, and so at that time we worked it out where I was gonna end my trip, and then from there I was just gonna fly to San Diego and then stay out there for a little bit and then go to the con. So I did that, went to the con, and she introduced me to, like, I got to meet Mark Alessi from what was it? Oh God, that company,
Oh, CrossGen.
CrossGen. Thank you. He came in with his granddaughter, nicest guy. I just always felt that he came in the wrong time. He came in the wrong. Like, I feel like CrossGen, if it was out now,
CrossGen is awesome. I
CrossGen would probably
completely
be
missed it.
killing it in the market. But
I
I just think it
completely
was the
missed it.
wrong
Now
time.
I'm buying back issues, and they're
Yeah,
awesome.
I just think that what took out CrossGen is the fact that Mark Alessi was in a time when he thought of, like, well, yeah, if we have a building and we have all these artists in here, and he had a lot of overhead payments to cover. And I
Right.
think that's what killed it, because it costs a lot of money to have people in there in the building. Whereas you think of, say Eric July, what he's doing right now, where he doesn't have a lot of overhead. He has his warehouse and stuff like that, but he's able to make money, and he's not, that money can be put to the talent, and the talent can all sort of send their work in electronically, that kind of stuff. If Mark Alessi had CrossGen now and followed that kind of blueprint, I think that he would be quite successful. But
I,
anyway, he was a nice guy, fantastic guy. Got to meet him, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, Frank, there's gonna be a Marvel party or whatever." And I was like, "Okay, I'm hanging with you guys." So I went with them to this Marvel party, and it was crazy, man. It was like George Perez was in his room and he was dancing with his daughter, and then some bald dude was in front of me, and I'm like, check out this Professor X looking dude walking around, and it was Brian Michael Bendis.
yep.
It was him,
Yeah.
and he turned around and he said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's like, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm an artist. I'm in a commercial illustrator." Suddenly I got into my whole mode. I was like, commercial illustrator. I work in advertising. I said, "Yeah, I work for advertising and stuff." He's like, "Oh, wow, that's pretty cool." And so I said, yeah. He said, he's like, I write books and stuff. And I was like, "Yeah, I know, dude.
He said,
And
I'm
yeah,
destroying Marvel right now.
that's what." But at the time when I went, it was like, you're talking like in 2000, like 2000. He was at the top of his game, and there was a couple of other people that were in it that you probably would know more so than I did. Because at that time, I think that I had kind of gotten out of comics. Kind of, I was just kind of like floating in and out, but I was working mostly advertising. But it was a cool party, and then from there we went to another party, and I hung out with Brian Polito with his crew, and they were fun. We ended up going to some fun house or whatever, and so hanging out. But it was just a wild experience at San
Cool.
Diego Comic Con doing that with them, and I was like, all right.
Never been
And
to
then
Comic Con.
nothing ever else happened with that comic book, unfortunately, with Bitch Press.
Well, I have another show at 8:30 called
Yes.
Comic Book Team Up. So
No problem, man.
yeah,
Thank you so
anything
much.
you
I
want
didn't
to say?
think you could tell the energy was so good that I'm just like, I'm
Yeah,
surprised I'm
you're
still
you're an
sitting
easy
here.
guest, man. Just say, just all I gotta do is introduce you.
Oh man, I want to thank everybody for coming on and just hanging out and listening to us ramble on.
Yeah, we had up to
Thank you.
100 people at one point. It was awesome.
Wow, man. I mean, thank you so much. I am honored. The fact that people are into my artwork, or that they're reading the comic book and stuff like that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You don't have to. I mean, I totally understand. I'm old school. It's like, I, people do stuff because they want to do it, And so to me, I'm humbled by that. And I thank you for it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you that you came tonight to listen to me ramble on. And I'm glad that you came and to listen to John ramble on. And please, by all means, please continue supporting the indie revolution. We
Yeah.
need you to support us and to spread the word about the books that are out there. Because I'm in a strong belief that comic books are not dead. They the indie movement is
We're
proving
going
that.
through a phase. We're going
Yeah,
through a
we're
change
here.
right now. Yeah.
We're here, folks. We just need the spotlight to get on us. That's all. We're on that side of the field where it's a little shady, a little shaded. But if we can get some of those spotlights on us a little bit, if you get a little hit, get lights on us, you'll see us. You see us, and I'm happy to see so many explorers out there. You people that are taking a chance, because that's what I did back in the day. I was an explorer. I looked at anything that came across that was very unique and different, and I would snatch it up and read it. I didn't care.
Yeah. I don't know. Comics are so much fun. Comics are so
It
much
is
fun.
fun. It is fun, and I think that we gotta remind a lot of people that Western comic books are fantastic. There's a history here. That we shouldn't be so ready to just give it at a history. I love manga, and manga is great. It doesn't mean that I knock down manga. I just feel
Right.
that we have a history here, and it's important that we sort of keep that going. Once me and John are gone, then who's gonna hold that torch? I want to see the next generation, next folks out there to carry the torch, so that guys so we're not looking at the end of the legacy that was by these other giants that came before us. We can't see that get snuffed out, so we got to fight for that.
Yep.
So there you go.
And we need your support, everybody in the chat.
Yes, yes, and thank you so much.
Pick up Heroic Tales 2 on Fund My Comic, and pick
Yep.
up Cowboys and Kaijus #6 on Kickstarter.
Kaijus and Cowboys.
What, did I say it wrong? Cowboys.
Yeah, you did. I love. You know what? I get a kick out of that because again, that just tells me it's like I hear so many different iterations of it. I'm like, I get a hoot out of it, man.
It's a good comic, man. It's a lot of fun. It's unique. There's nothing else like it. Your art is unique. There's nobody
thank
like
you so much, man. I mean, again, this is a testament to the people that came before me, to the Herb Trimpe, John Byrne, Jack Kirby, Frank Robbins, the list goes Sal Buscema, the list goes on and on and on. They influenced me, and then hopefully somebody looks at my artwork and they hopefully get inspired and influenced, and then they come out with crazy looking stuff. And then hopefully it's so unique that they can keep this thing going. Let's keep it going. That's what I'm talking about.
Yep. All right. And on that note, I got to go. I got 5 minutes to prepare for the next
All right,
show.
everyone. Thank you.
Guys,
John, thank you so much, man.
You are always welcome to come. You can be my co-host every week.
Well, I'm going to do this next surgery. And like I said, this is going to be the year of healing for me so that next year I could be walking tall. I want to walk a little bit taller.
Walking tall. You carry
With
that
a big stick. With a big stick. Hey, everyone, take care. Thank you so much for watching.
See you guys.
All right.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
5 minutes, same channel, comic book team up with RJ and then my buddy Mike DeShaunis. So see you, everybody.